You can get rejected all the time. I have a very short memory of all the times I've been rejected, but the times that you get that yes, that's when a door opens and an opportunity makes itself apparent.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Fitness is more than a $20 billion a year industry, proof that practically everyone wants to be more healthy or in better shape. What if many of the things you believe about exercise are actually false? Luke Carlson flipped his script from training professional athletes to teaching people all over the world about evidence-based exercise. Luke is the CEO and founder of Discover Strength, among the highest volume and revenue boutique fitness studios in North America. He has several degrees and certifications to back him up, from the University of Minnesota to Stanford. Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. It's just my pleasure to be here with you, Kristi.
The way that you talk about exercise, I think, is going to blow most people's mind. So I want to ease them into the conversation, because I don't want anyone driving off the road or, stopping their walk or something. So let's start with your professional career. You started knowing that you wanted to become a trainer, but your path wasn't exactly a straight one like most people's.
Yeah, well, I was always very much into exercise, and I was an undergraduate in kinesiology, exercise science at the University of Minnesota. And I was also, I had this wonderful opportunity to work for the Minnesota Vikings at a very young age. I was in a mentor program in high school where I wrote a letter, not an email, a letter to the head strength coach of the Minnesota Vikings and said, hey, I'd love to work with you during my senior year of high school. And I thought, he's going to reject this. He didn't. And so I spent my senior year of high school being mentored by the head strength coach for the Vikings. His name was Steve Wetzel. This is late 90s, early 2000s. So I grew up in Shakopee. The Vikings facility at the time was Eden Prairie. I'd go to Eden Prairie 3-4 days out of the week and do a one-on-one classroom session with him and get personally trained by him, and was in the facility every day. So by the time my sophomore year of college came around, he reached out to me and said, hey, I got a stack of resumes on my desk for our third position that we're going to hire. And all these people are eminently qualified with graduate degrees. And I'm 19 years old. He said, if you want the job, it's yours. And I said, absolutely. So I was 19 years old, working 30, 35 hours a week for the Minnesota Vikings, training athletes. That's all we did, was just train them one-on-one, and then going to school. So I had this wonderful opportunity to learn in an academic setting and also apply it immediately with these very high-level athletes. What a great combination to foster a passion for learning around exercise science.
And you did something also that I know you talk about leadership, and I want to just stop and point something out from your story. You're a teenager and you said, you know what, I'd like to work there. I'm going to write a letter. Now, the worst thing that could have happened is you would have never heard anything, or they could have sent you a very polite no thank you, but you tried. And I think that's so important just in general in life, is that don't assume you're going to get a no. What if you get a yes?
Yeah, one of our core values organizationally is creating our own future, which means you got to ask, right? And you can get rejected all the time, but you're just I have a very short memory of all the times I've been rejected, but the times that you get that yes, right? That's when a door opens and an opportunity makes itself apparent. These are inflection points, right? This is a major inflection point in your life. And sometimes that inflection point is born out of just asking and writing the letter or writing an email.
And that made a big difference in your career. So you have this great opportunity to be learning in a classroom setting and be watching and learning in a gym setting and seeing how what you were learning and the science you were learning was translating into the athlete's performance. What was that like to get them both at the same time? And how did it change the trajectory of how you think about exercise or what you know?
Yeah.
I guess you don't think about it. You know, you've got all the science.
Well, I had a wonderful mentor. I mean, the strength and conditioning coach for the Vikings, it wasn't that he was just employed by the Minnesota Vikings. He was really, really special. And our whole philosophy was let's be guided by the scientific research, which was pretty uncommon. Normally, you would say, well, I have the name of an NFL organization, a franchise behind my name, so I have credibility. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have credibility. We really had a research-based approach. And I can remember being in undergrad. I can remember being 20 years old, and I can remember the classroom I was in thinking, I love studying about this. I love studying about motor units and muscle fibers and all of this exercise science. But I knew, and I can remember it was a summer course. I remember the classroom thinking, we're not studying this in a vacuum. If this doesn't trickle down and actually impact how a human works out, it's all for naught. And I knew at that time that the way people were exercising, there was a heck of a lot of people exercising. Our society is a pro-exercise society, which is great. The way we exercise just doesn't reflect at all what the millions of dollars and better part of 5 decades of scientific research says we could be focused on. So I said at the age of 20, I'm going to spend my entire professional career bridging the gap between what the science knows, meaning what we constantly uncover, the preponderance of research, and just connecting it to how people work out. Because working out is awesome. I like working out more than restaurants or hotels or all the other different industries that you could go into. I mean, they're all fantastic, but I'm into working out. And I thought we could apply that scientific research to how someone actually exercises.
So when did you make the leap from good job, great job most people would just kill to get, to, you know what, I'm going to leave this and I'm going to go and I'm going to do my own thing? How did you make that leap?
Yeah, so I was in graduate school. So I started graduate school right after my undergrad in exercise physiology at the University of Minnesota, still working for the Vikings. And I was either going to get a PhD and be a tenure track professor, or I was going to stay in the NFL and be a head NFL strength coach the rest of my life. Both of those paths were great paths. I had a wonderful mentor, probably 30 years older than me, pull me aside and say, you have some skill sets that would lend to being an entrepreneur, starting a business. And I said, I knew nothing about business. I never thought about it. I thought about it for a few weeks. And then I went to visit the only entrepreneur that I'd ever met. And at the time, I didn't know this, but the guy turns out to be the owner of the most profitable health club in the world. He was on the cover of Inc. magazine in 2008, summer 2008, it was August. To this day, still the single most popular selling single issue of Inc. magazine, his rags to riches story. I flew to Florida, sat down with him and said, can you teach me something about starting a business? So we talked for 4 hours straight. He left me saying, you need to read Good to Great by Jim Collins. I said, okay, great. I'm 23 years old. I go home, buy the book, sit in a Starbucks, read this book, and I say, this book's going to be the blueprint. And then it was Built to Last by Jim Collins. And then it got me on the path, Kristi, of reading so many of the books that you've read and that I've seen on your own bookshelf at the office there. And that launched my interest in business, in management, in leadership. And I've, for the last, 18-ish years, I've had the absolute joy of combining the technical work, my passion for exercise and exercise science, with leadership and management and all the different components of growing a business.
So there's another inflection point, Luke, because did you know this gentleman? Did you send another letter? How do you get 4 hours with someone of that caliber when you're the age that you're at? And could I just pick your brain for a while? How does that happen?
Coincidentally, I had visited there about a year before to try out a leg press machine that the Vikings were thinking about buying that he had in his health club. And when I met him, Kristi, I'm telling you, I shook his hand. I probably didn't even make eye contact and start a conversation. I was so excited to find this leg press, right? Then when I thought about starting a business of some kind or starting to do some research on it, I thought, this is the only guy that I know. It turns out that he is just the hallmark of this individual. His name is Joe Cirilli with a C. He is just so selfless with his time. And at the time, I didn't realize how fortunate I was. I mean, I enjoyed it. I just didn't realize how rare it was that he was spending that time with me. And I would constantly call him. I visited him probably 5 times before I actually opened the business. And I think finally he said, hey, no more visits. Now you're ready. You just need to open this business. And I thought, okay, that's pretty good advice. I need to just move forward.
Your career has been impacted by the generosity of people older than you and who poured time and experience and energy into you. Do you feel like you have to pay that forward to do that for someone else because you were so impacted?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kristi, I also think the teacher appears when the student is ready, right? So like I started asking questions and people, I think, said, well, you know what? This person really wants to learn. So I'm going to share some of this knowledge. And I absolutely feel like I have to pass it on to other people. If someone has a question, or, I'm going to get on a plane early tomorrow morning and go to San Diego to speak at a big industry conference there. And I'm going to, talk to, 50 people for the next 3 hours the second I get off stage. And that's valuable. It's the most important thing I can do. It's what's been modeled to me from so many wonderful mentors and teachers. And some of these mentors, I've connected with them multiple times, but then there's someone from a distance that you can look to. And for me, it's this individual in Orlando. It's Joe Cirilli. But it's also, I just wrapped up reading a wonderful book on the leadership style of Abraham Lincoln, right? So I can constantly think about the leaders that I've been influenced by that I know well, or that I've just studied and read about. How would they deal with the situation that I'm in? And I've loved that. I've loved that process.
And full disclosure, I'm a big Discover Strength fan. I've been working out twice a week virtually for a year, and your Discover Strength is a client of Media Minefield, and we share a business coach. So we have these connections. And yet I really wanted you on the podcast because, first of all, I think, yes, everyone should be a Discover Strength client. Yes. And because when you talk about exercise, it is unlike anyone I've ever heard talk about exercise. And I read a lot. I love learning. I love filling my brain with information. And when I've heard you speak about it, it's like you're the only person who's saying this. And I don't know if that's true or not, but most people talk about exercise, cardio. Let's do lots of cardio. Let's sweat a lot. Let's focus on the time that you're sweating. And when you talk about it, you talk about things like, you know what? Everyone should be lifting weights every 20 minutes, twice a week. And I have this quote from the last time I heard you speak. If you feel like you have more to give, more to do, there is no better thing to extend your life than weightlifting. Yeah. Talk about that philosophy and why it feels like you're the only one out there beating this drum.
Well, first of all, that quote, that paraphrase is inspired by the late Stephen Covey's concept, or his 7th habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people. He says you have to sharpen the saw. And there's a lot of different ways we can sharpen the saw, but he says, well, start with exercise, because when you engage in exercise, you're meaningfully upgrading your physical, your mental, maybe your spiritual, all of these different aspects of our health, of who we are as a human being. And when Covey said that, he wrote that in 1989. He had no idea how right he actually was, because we now have an additional 3 decades of scientific research that says it turns out that strength training, meaning lifting a weight or doing a push-up, just challenging our muscles with resistance, is not just good for our muscle strength and our muscle endurance and our bone mineral density, right? The prevention of osteoporosis, but we actually enhance cognitive function. We can ward off what's called mild cognitive decline. If we have some mild cognitive decline, we can actually improve our cognitive function. If you're 65 years old and you want to stay relevant, if you want to continue to work, if you feel like you have more value to create, more to contribute, then exercising intelligently in our 50s and our 60s and our 70s, it's the most important thing we can do to sharpen the saw. I'm enamored by this concept of living life in crescendo, meaning there's more for us to do, there's more to learn, there's more value to create, there's just more to contribute. And if we're going to live that way, then it has to be rooted in this habit of sharpening the saw via some really intelligent exercise.
So what does intelligent exercise mean?
Yeah, great question. It means, as a starting point, let's not make our exercise decisions based on what's popular, what we've always done, what we see on Instagram, what the fittest person that we know of is currently doing. And that's normally what we've done is we've looked at someone that's fit and said, I'd love to look like that. I'm going to emulate their exercise. But what we don't understand when we do that is maybe the exercise intervention that they're engaged in didn't cause the physique that we're looking at or the performance that we're looking at. A great example is Usain Bolt, the fastest sprinter in Olympic history, 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash, just incredible performance. Well, if you studied his performance and you emulated everything he did, you'd find out that leading up to his world record-setting 100-meter dash performance, he averaged over 100 chicken McNuggets per day leading up to that performance for almost 2 straight weeks. And you realize, okay, chicken McNuggets are not the key to running fast. This guy has some other natural ability. So we shouldn't copy fit people or successful physiques, athletes, etc. Instead, we should just look at what does the preponderance of scientific research say? The beauty of it is instead of looking at one athlete or one person and saying, did this work for you? We can do studies and we can have 100 participants or 200 participants, and we can do 20 of those studies across different institutions, and we can do a meta-analysis, a pooling of all these studies to understand what works best to lose fat, what works best to add some muscle, what should we expect, what outcomes can we expect if we engage in some strength training? Because it turns out there's all of these benefits from exercise that no one's even talking about. Exercise is better for us than we ever realized. I like to say that I know a lot of people that love to exercise, but I've met very few people that know what the actual benefits of exercise are. Exercise is better for us than we've assumed, than we've been told. And so it all is rooted in the scientific research. Let's get away from the fads. Let's get away from the folklore that we continue to pass along. And let's just look at the scientific research because we have so much of it. It's so good. But Kristi, I'm telling you, this is not a conspiracy. There's just been a disconnect between all of this academic research and then what's actually going on in our wonderful gyms and health clubs and studios and boutiques, which I love all of them. There just isn't much of a collaboration between those two entities or those two facets of our industry, and there really should be.
So if I were to say to you, okay, Luke, I've got 2 hours and I really want to lose 5 pounds. I feel like I should go run for 2 straight hours. And you would tell me, no, that is not what you should do. You should lift weights, which most people think is how to gain more weight.
Yeah. We know very clearly that you burn a little bit more calories while you do cardio. But it turns out in the 22 hours, in your example, after you've done that cardio, something called your energy, and the word energy just means calories, your energy expenditure due to physical activity decreases the rest of the day. So if you do an hour or 2 hours of cardio this morning, your physiology finds a way to preserve your calorie expenditure the rest of the day. Our metabolism actually slows down the rest of the day. Where if you strength train, you burn calories while you do it. If you strength train for just 30 minutes, the next 23 and a half hours of the day, the rest of the day, you actually burn significantly more calories, about 5 to up to about 10% more calories for the next 3 days, in fact. So if we look at the time after a bout of exercise, we're burning a heck of a lot more calories after we strength train than after we do cardiovascular exercise. Now, going on a run, doing some cardio is good for our heart, but the research is so conclusive, and might I add, depressing. It's just not good for weight loss or burning calories. And I'm someone who I enjoy cardio. Training for the New York City Marathon. I mean, I love cardiovascular exercise. I ran 20 miles on Saturday morning to prepare to run a marathon, but it does almost nothing. I mean, we know this very clearly. It does almost nothing for weight loss. The average woman, from the day that she signs up for her first ever marathon, the day that she toes the starting line, the average woman gains between 1 to 2 pounds of fat for the aforementioned reason we're just burning less calories after the bout of exercise, which I don't like any of that, but the mechanism is very clearly understood. No one talks about it though, right? We just think that, hey, I did some sweating today, therefore my body must be changing. And we just know that is not the case.
Since I've heard you talk about that, I get on the treadmill or go outside and I think like I'm doing this for fun. I'm sweating for fun, not for some of the other things that I lift weights for now, but it is a different mindset. If you do things for fun, and I like to do this, I'm choosing to do this, and it is good for me mentally, but it's different than I'm doing this because I want to hold my grandbaby someday. That is a different thing. And I mentioned this when I met you, that when I ran a 10 mile, I like about mile 6, when I was like at the end of the training, I would start thinking about pizza, and I would get home and we would order Pizza Hut and delivery. And that's more calories than what I just did in the run. And it's so true. It's so true. It's a mind game that I can't believe I didn't connect the dots until I heard you talking like this.
Yeah. And we all do that. Like, we reward ourselves after we do extreme amounts of exercise. You know, the last couple miles of any really long run, like you said, that someone does, they are daydreaming about where we're going to brunch afterwards, what kind of pizza we're having for dinner, like the beer that we're going to drink. We just have it all mapped out. And we have an incredible ability to replace the calories that we expend from that acute bout of aerobic exercise. And then, like I said, combine that with the fact that our metabolism starts to slow down after we do that exercise.
So let's talk lifting weights. Most people also lift weights wrong. This whole episode's kind of a buzzkill for people, Luke, because they're like, I thought all this time, I thought I knew what I was doing. But no, turns out science is going to tell you something different. So the way most people lift weights is we think, okay, we don't want to lift heavy weights because we're going to get too bulky. And as we age, we should lift even less because we've seen, the 80-year-olds with soup cans, and that's what grandma should be doing. And then many of us grew up with Jane Fonda and some of that aerobic kind of stuff. And we can do push-ups. That's how we get stronger. And we want to make sure we stay light. And if you're a man and you want to get bulky, you want to do heavy. And you want to do as much as you possibly can. And you just want to, wear the muscle shirt and grunt a lot and call it good. All of that is not true, right?
Yeah, I think you articulated maybe the most prevalent myth in exercise, or at least in strength training, the myth that if you want bigger muscles, you got to lift heavy weight. And if you want to tone your muscles and improve your endurance, you lift light weights and you do a lot of repetitions. So the stereotype is, hey, this is what men or football players should be doing. And this is what a woman or someone that's maybe a little bit older should be doing. And that is just not rooted in the research whatsoever. We are so clear on this. You can use a lightweight and do a lot of repetitions, or you can use a heavy weight and do just a few repetitions. And your neuromuscular physiology, how your brain talks to your muscles, you can't tell the difference, right? So you have total autonomy. If you want the biggest muscles possible, you can use a lightweight and do 30 reps. And the research is completely clear. Your muscles can get it just as big as if you used a very heavy weight and did 5 repetitions. Your muscle strength and your muscle endurance improve in a linear relationship. They are not separate trainable entities. Our muscle size is genetically predetermined. So if we lift weights, a lightweight or a heavyweight, if we have the predisposition, the genetic makeup to get bigger muscles, our muscles will get bigger. If we don't, they won't get bigger. 99.8% of women just cannot get large muscles. They can lift a lightweight, a moderate weight, or a heavyweight, and they're going to add some lean muscle to their body, but their muscle is just not going to get large. And this is no longer disputed in the scientific research. However, there's very few people that are really into working out that are aware of this, that we have now total autonomy when you lift weights. Lift heavy weight, lift a lightweight, it doesn't matter. The only exception to that is preventing osteoporosis. If we want to prevent osteoporosis and improve our bone mineral density, then we actually need a heavier weight. So stated otherwise, older women are the only population that actually need to lift heavy weights, which is the exact opposite of what we've always done. Older women always lifted lighter weights. So in almost every exercise decision we've tactically made a decision that was 180 degrees pointing us in the wrong direction.
How did we get here, Luke? Why do so many of us have so many myth-based truths that incorrectly guide how we exercise?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is because in relative terms, exercise, the idea of doing cardiovascular exercise or strength training exercise, it is very new. It is a new field. In terms of the academic study of it, we're new to it in the 60s and 70s, and we didn't devote a heck of a lot of focus in studying strength training exercise until the late 80s and early 90s. We were taught in the year 1970 that if you did cardio, we were taught this by Dr. Kenneth Cooper, you'd live longer and you'd be a healthier human being, right? Well, in 1970, we learned from Arnold Schwarzenegger, a bodybuilder, that if you lifted weights, you're going to get big muscles and you were probably going to become a football player. And we still cling to that false dichotomy today. This is what cardio is for. It's for my health and for my wellness. And strength training is for football players, like a bodybuilder. And we now know that's just not the case, right? Every solid cardiac rehab program in this country has a massive strength training component to it. One of my favorite researchers, her name is Barbara Strasser, she says that strength training is just as important in preventing major cardiovascular disease risk factors as aerobic exercise. Research in women says if a woman only does cardiovascular exercise and she doesn't engage in strength training, she doesn't confer optimal protection against cardiovascular disease. We used to think that strength training was for muscles and bone, and that cardiovascular exercise, aerobic exercise, going on a run or hopping on the elliptical, was for our hearts. And we now know that strength training is for our hearts as well. It turns out that strength training is just more valuable than we ever would have guessed, we ever would have assumed.
So you have these fitness clubs. They're small. They have only machines. You're not going to go there for Zumba, right? It's just for strength training. And everyone is working with a trainer who has a degree, and this is what they do. And there's a very particular way that people lift weights, which is all fine and good until 2020 happens. So 2020 happens, the entire industry pretty much is shut down, and you find yourself with a whole bunch of trainers who can't have people into their facility to do the work that they're supposed to do. And you made a very quick decision that was pretty revolutionary in your industry at the time, because I think you're one of the first ones to do it, that completely shifted the trajectory of your business. Talk about how you knew what to do and what it meant.
So Kristi, thanks for asking. So this is, and we all lived through this. This is Monday night, March, it was either 15th or 16th. We're in Minnesota. Governor says everything's shutting down tomorrow, right? Every restaurant, every fitness club, everything was shutting down. And I got on a call with my leadership team, and we told all of our personal trainers, we have about 45 personal trainers across the company at all of our locations. And we said, you have the day off tomorrow. We're going to communicate with you what the plan is. Our leadership team met the next day, and we talked about what is our plan. And Kristi, like every other business, we had the conversations. What's our cash position like, right? How long are we going to be closed? The governor announced that we'd be closed for 2 weeks. Well, what does that do if we have no revenue for 2 weeks and then we're open again? Okay, so we can handle this. And we thought about all the different contingencies. But remember, at that time, we were all thinking pretty short term. We didn't know this was going to last as long as it lasted or is lasting. So I had wonderful conversations, productive conversations with our leadership team for hours that next day, which was a Tuesday. Tuesday night, I sent a text message to my leadership team. It wasn't a Slack. If it's a text message, that means this is pretty urgent. I said, we need to jump on a call again tonight. So we all got in a call, and I said, guys, tomorrow morning when you wake up, we are a virtual personal training company. Now, mind you, we had never done any virtual personal training. I said, we need to burn the ships. We need to act. We need to conduct ourselves like we're the best virtual personal training company on earth. All of our decisions, our strategy, our tactics, it's all going to be built around virtual personal training, which still aligned with the things that were a part of our strategy, right? What was our strategic niche? It was personalized strength training. All of our uniques or our differentiating capabilities, they were still in place. So that really set the tone for we need to put all of our focus on virtual personal training. Now, how is that different than what the rest of our industry did? The rest of our industry eventually launched some type of virtual offering, but it wasn't revenue producing. It was, hey, we're going to placate our customers until we can open the doors, right? We're going to give them a little something to keep them engaged until we can open the door. We wanted to offer a product where people could actually engage with our personal trainers and we could drive revenue. That was the big difference. Now, let me tell you, when every company eventually went virtual, they actually got it backwards. Now, this is really important, Kristi. They offered some type of workout that you could watch, but the research is very clear. As an exerciser, we don't need to watch somebody else demonstrate or exercise. The research is conclusive. We need someone watching us. So what we did is in tablets and computers and iPhones, we directly supervised our clients' workouts, and we were able to give them performance-related feedback in their workout, which is the opposite of what so many of the other virtual options out there were. And that's really interesting. We just turned to the research for that question too, is what do people actually need? They need supervision and coaching, which means we need to see them. They don't need to see us. Of course, they could see us. I mean, a Zoom call goes both ways. So we launched that within 5 days of being shut down. And by the time our shutdown ended, my goodness, it went the rest of March. We were shut down all of April, all of May. We were shut down through June 10th. And then we were shut down again for another full month in November and December. So in 2020, we were closed completely for 4 months of it, but we were able to drive significant revenue. And to this day in 2021, virtual personal training is still about 19% of our overall revenue, despite the fact that all of our studios are open.
It's so weird and awesome to be trained virtually. It's the only way. I've only been in once. I do it virtually. I love it because I don't have to drive anywhere. I don't have to, Minnesota winter cold. They come into my house, but they don't really have to come into my house. And it's such a hard workout. And the little tiny things like, okay, you're doing a wall sit, your angle's wrong. You're going to hurt your knees. It's such a hard workout, even though I'm by myself and there's someone on Zoom. And it's so smart how you did that, and that it continues to be 20%, almost 20% of your revenue going forward. And you can train people when they're on vacation. You can train people when they go to their summer home or their winter home or another country for work. It's really smart. And I wonder, I guess I'm interested in your perspective. You are such a learner, and you are such someone who loves information and loves to learn from the greats, the truly greats. And I know you've taken a lot of that information. And yet, when that pandemic happened in the middle of March and your entire business was shut down, there was no book to open. There was no playbook. No one had done that, not just in your industry, but in no industry. Do you think that some of the truths that were embedded in your head that you had read about from greats who had gone on and done incredible things in unexpected circumstances came out through you? Or do you think that this was just a lifetime of innovation because, as your mentor told you years ago, that you have the entrepreneurial seed in you? What do you attribute that quick pivot to?
Yeah, I like to say that I've never had an original idea in my life. Like all of my, all of the work that I've been involved with is because I learned it from someone else. And I think I have a strong filter, but I'm not visionary in terms of I don't have the idea, but I can read and learn and decide how should we do this or apply this. And I remember listening when the world started to fall apart seemingly in March. I was listening to a podcast from a wonderful coach of entrepreneurs. And he said that during times of calamity, when things are really tough, what the leader of an organization will often do is they turn the focus inward. They start thinking about their people. They start thinking about cash position. They start thinking, and that is very normal. That's our natural tendency. And much of that is good. We should be thinking about our people, but you need someone to start thinking externally. If you can start thinking about the customer and how could we serve the customer? How could we create value? How do we take our strengths, our differentiating capabilities, and how do you go market facing with those so you can actually drive revenue? Then you have opportunity. So that's what we did is we just said, well, instead of just spending all of our time thinking about us, how could we actually start thinking about the market and how could we actually create value for our customers? So that was, it's Dan Sullivan, who is the creator of Strategic Coach. I was listening to his podcast and I said, well, that's what we need to do. And I'm in, peer CEO groups and I'm talking to a lot of people, but all anybody ever did, Kristi, was talk about the virus and talk about the government and talk about masks and talk about, and I said, I told my leadership team, we're going to spend no time talking about any of that. All of that falls into our circle of interest, but it's not our circle of control or even our circle of influence. We couldn't influence any of it. I said, all of our conversations as a leadership team are going to be around what can we actually control. So to me, that was the mindset that guided productive discussions tactically.
So I've been a fan of Dan Sullivan and was in his 10X program up until the pandemic. And so I have a lot of friends there. So I'm going to send this to them because they're going to be really impressed that Dan's podcast had impacted your thinking to the point that you were able to do exactly what he spent his whole life doing, which is getting entrepreneurs to think differently and to change the economy. So it's incredible to think about the internal versus the external.
His quote was always, I remember this quote, he says, the problem is actually not the problem. The problem is you're thinking about the problem. How are you thinking about the problem? And the problem, that we went through was the same for everyone, but how could you change your thinking around it? And at first, that sounds like a cliche, but when you think external versus internal, that's where your possibilities and your opportunities actually come from.
And you weren't paralyzed by the struggle, because a lot of people, I think, took them a while to make a decision because they just got paralyzed by looking at, okay, here's our projection. What if we are closed for 4 months? What if, spiral. And you can't make productive decisions in an emotional state of horror, frankly, which is what a lot of industries, the whole country, the whole world is in at the time. So to think about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to turn it? And because the podcast is named this, how are you going to flip your script and really become productive quickly? Because a lot of people's lives depend on it. I mean, all the people that work for you, a paycheck is a good thing.
Kristi, if you ask me, what am I most proud about over everything that we went through during that time period, is in our industry, this was unheard of. We didn't furlough, we didn't lay off, we didn't, every one of our employees got full compensation during that entire period. And a lot of industries really had a boon during COVID. We are not one of those industries. I mean, wonderful, iconic health clubs and fitness facilities and studios worldwide were brought to their knees by this thing. So the fact that we didn't have any furloughs or layoffs and people still got paid, I will forever, 50 years from now, I will be celebrating that fact.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I was trained by your people during that time, and they were really grateful to have jobs, really grateful. And the loyalty that those people have towards you, I suspect, is unmatched.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So we aren't going to talk about it, but I do want to encourage people, go to the Discover Strength website. We will have a link on the Flip Your Script podcast website. I want you to read more about how Luke talks and thinks about lifting weights, not just that you should be doing it, but that there's a specific way to do it and there's a specific way to maximize the benefits of that. So I want you to read about that. There's some videos. It's great stuff. You can learn more there. I want to end the podcast, Luke, by thanking you for coming on and asking you if there's a quote that you have looked to or that has motivated you as you continue to evolve in industry.
I have a quote that centers me. And for the longest time in my life, I always wanted all of the stars to align in anything I was doing, right? In business, it has to be the perfect situation, right? If I'm going to run a marathon, everything's got to be perfect, right? And what if the weather's not right? What if this? I came across Marcus Aurelius's definition of flexibility and resilience. Marcus Aurelius said his definition of flexibility and resilience is to look at any given situation and say, you are exactly what I've been looking for. And so when the pandemic hit, I said, this is what I've been looking for. I've been spending my whole life preparing for this. And if you can wake up every day as a leader and look at whatever you're facing and say, this is exactly what I was looking for, that was the filter that I needed.
Thank you. And when I heard you speak, you recommended the Rockefeller book by Chernow, which I listened to. Thank you very much. And you told me to get an Oura ring, and I did, and I love it. And there's more people in the office that have them because it's fantastic. And I've talked about it on this podcast because I love my Oura ring. So thank you very much. Yep, they're awesome. And it's no surprise to the people listening that you talk about exercise and physiology, and you also talk a fair amount all over the world about leadership and strategy and are guiding a lot of people's thinking and businesses in totally different industries. So if you ever have the opportunity to hear Luke Carlson speak, I encourage you because he has a lot of things to say and as a learner continues to evolve his own thinking based on the newest and the latest science. So, Luke, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
There are a lot of things that we can take away from Luke, some of it the tactics of exercise and how we think differently. And just in general, we've talked about it on this podcast before. Get curious, ask questions. Are some of the things that you think are true actually myths? Learn, read, explore, innovate. My hope is Luke's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.